Welcome to the Meat and Potatoes podcast. Today we're joined by Ilija Vrajich, who is the co-founder and CEO of Alcomy. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Very cool name, by the way.
Thank you.
How did you guys get it in whenever you got it?
So my name is actually my grandfather's name. And there's a bit of a tradition in my dad's from the former Yugoslavia. And so it's a great honor to name your firstborn son after, your father. And so That's how I got my name. And it's always been a great conversation starter. My mom used to think that, when she first heard it was a girl's name and people would make fun of me. But no one's ever made fun of me for my name. And it's always been, like I said, a great conversation starter.
Yeah.
All these years.
Yeah, we were talking about it before, of how to pronounce it and taking bets on where you're from.
Yeah, everyone's always...
It is a good conversation starter. Well, very cool. Let's talk a little bit about Alcomy, the founding story, a little bit of the business model, and how you guys are building this business. So what do y'all do, and where did the idea come from?
Yeah, so we're essentially software for assisted living in the assisted living space. To date, about 70% of assisted living facilities, senior care, they operate via paper, so paper binders for meds and those kind of things. And my family and we were in the industry. When I was 18, my parents opened up their own residential assisted living facility in California, and so I was involved from that very beginning. Then after graduating from BYU, we ended up opening up our own location. And I'm an efficiency nut. I don't like wasting time and things like that. And so here I am using this paper-based system and trying to come up with a way to make things more and more efficient. And so the idea for Alcomy was really born about over 10 years ago, back in 2010, when we had opened up our second location and management became a little bit more difficult. And so the idea was there's got to be a better way with the complexities of dealing with the residents and the elderly that you have. Their care is changing constantly, especially if you get into like dementia care. You're having medications and things like that changing constantly, and you have to keep on track of all that. And so the idea was there needed to be a better way of doing this, and digital, with alerts and all that kind of stuff can definitely do that. So the idea was born way back then. We ended up selling our locations in 2017 and set out to build Alcomy. And so that's kind of where the idea originated from.
Very cool. You have a wealth of knowledge about assisted living. It's been known by a lot of other names over the years. Old folks home.
Old folks home, yeah.
Assisted care, compassionate something. You drive by it, and some of them look like a Ritz-Carlton, and others look like that's where you don't want to end.
That's right. Yeah, a shack or something like that. Yeah.
I remember my first exposure. I was part of some idiotic singing troupe when I was in kindergarten, and we had to go and sing. And I still remember vividly this place. And I like old people. Like, they have way cool stories, but I did not want to go back. Right. So there's a lot of logistics to this. And it didn't look like anyone was like overly happy, and it didn't look like anyone was having an easy time. So I can imagine getting out any of the friction there would only benefit the employees and the people there, right?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the great things, that when we're trying to solve this problem, it's not just for, let's say, residents, which, going digital definitely improves resident care and overall experience inside of assisted living. But the industry as a whole has a problem with burnout, right? You have, so our product also helps the care staff, right? They're mostly, when you're having information just be in your head of, you might have, even if it's a small facility of 15, but think about how many things are changing with that particular individual, and you as a caregiver have to remember to go do XYZ for that person. Same thing with like the admins. I remember when I was operating, like, I remember counting up all the different people that I was communicating with on a weekly basis, and it was over 100, and we had two kind of smaller locations. And so you're constantly, and then on top of that, the liability is very high, right? Like, if you miss something, if you fail in your ability to provide that service, you have a very angry, and rightfully so, or very angry daughter or son that this care item didn't get done for their parent. And so the beauty, and that's kind of the beauty of our what I see in our team, is that they all love the idea that we're not just helping, not just one person benefits, everybody in the industry benefits from from the residents to even the families to the staff, everybody.
Yeah. And I again, having spent some time in these places, but far from an expert, there's obviously the medication,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's the scheduling, and then I remember my great grandma was in one, and you could only visit at certain times,
Mm-hmm.
and then I remember, there was doctors and nurses getting scalded by family members,
Yeah.
right? Of like, well, did you guys do this? And they're
Mm-hmm.
like, well,
I told so and so. Well,
yeah,
they didn't tell me, and yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
So, but let alone like, and then, there's people that pass on, and then new people that come in, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of different personalities.
Yeah.
And then I remember there's some that were just angry that they were there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they made life really hard.
Yeah.
And they might actually like make their jobs really difficult by taking too much pills or like hiding things. It
Yep.
was kind of crazy.
It's a whole. I mean, if you could do a soap opera, if you could do like a reality show inside of assisted living, I think it would be a hit.
Yeah.
Because there's just a lot of crazy that does go on.
Yeah.
For sure.
Because a lot of them don't care anymore, right? They're at the end, and they're like, "What does it matter anymore?" So there's the digital efficiency of the whole thing. You mentioned you hate wasting time, and you like efficiency there. Where do you start with something like this? Because it is a big undertaking.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we chose to start on the more of the operational side. So medications being one of the most important things. And in the industry, you have to document. If it wasn't documented, it didn't happen. And so even though, like, let's take medications, even if somebody had taken their medication in the morning, but we had forgotten to document it, if there was ever an allegation that came up or someone complained that we weren't giving medications, if we didn't have that documentation, we would then deem that we didn't do it. And so, with the traditional paper-based system, if you're going to audit each one of those binders and go through all the meds and make sure everything's signed, well, how much time does that take versus something like Alcomy, where it's just doing it for you, and in real time, it's letting you know, hey, something has been missed. And so we started with medications, and that being one of the most important aspects of care is making sure people get their medications when they're supposed to. There was so many instances in our own facilities where people's behaviors would change after moving in, and it was because now they were getting their medications on a regular basis. And so, that's just one aspect of that. We also chose to go into what we call care tasks. So you can think of it being like the Asana or ClickUp for the assisted living world, right? So anything related to care that needs to be done, being able to assign that. We thought that was important, that things can fall through the cracks when we don't set some kind of schedule to what needs to be done, especially with all these different parts moving. And then, of course, there's other aspects like just daily shift notes communication. And so that was really the core where we started. We're now into the documentation side, where like typically when you have a move-in, you have some kind of state forms that need to be signed, some kind of mission paperwork. So be able to digitally sign that like a DocuSign. That's the next evolution of kind of where we're going. And then the third phase of that would be kind of more generalized into other task-based things. We've seen that as people have come and started using the care tasks, they're like, I like this task-based flow. What can I do this also in, hey, I've got to get my general liability insurance renewed. I want to be reminded 3 months before, so I'm not scrambling at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the overall concept. I remember I had one guy that in California, you had to go every 2 years and renew your certificate. And one guy, his name was Alan Byron, and he used to always talk about systemizing the operations, because there's so many different things that we've talked about that are going on. And so he just always talked about like systemize it, break it down so that you're never scrambling. You're always staying ahead of the sticks, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the philosophy that we've taken, like how we're going to build this is where are they being impacted the most? And that's why we started with meds and care. Then the other aspects, they're still a big effect, but we'll get to those things.
Yeah. And you guys had a distinct advantage that you could speak the language, you could feel the pain, you knew everything.
Yeah.
You were also able to see like the software that you built start to work probably pretty quickly, and like saving time.
Oh yeah.
Improving med schedules, all of that, right? So who are your ultimate customers, right? Like, it seems like an obvious question, but you got to sell it to somebody, I would assume.
Right.
Who makes the decision?
It's going to be, usually it's the admin owners, right? They they want the documentation. Usually the struggle, there's a couple, but usually the struggle is, hey, we need staff to document these things. We need them to check these things off for liability reasons. We need the data so that as we learn, we can provide better care. But then there's the struggle with the staff, remembering to do it or doing it. And when we went out and did our validation interviews, we found that staff were resistant to doing their shift notes and documenting their stuff because they had to handwrite it, right? They had to go find this binder and remember, what do I need to document? And so, that's kind of where things are.
And so it's always tricky with the new startup, whether it's in assisted living or whatever, getting traction and like improving upon it.
Yeah.
You guys would have like a really good understanding, I would assume, with each new release, each new facility. What did you guys do to systematize and like double check and make sure there was redundancies where there needed to be, or people were actually doing it the way you thought they should?
Yeah. I think one of the big things, one of the nice things has been coming from the industry. I mean, there's not been anything that's been too surprising, even up to date. I mean, there's different nuances, but that has been a big benefit to really kind of get ahead of things. But definitely we did a slow rollout. So we had a few customers, and we saw, like our second one, she reported back after the first week. It was great because she was like, man, I've already saved 8 hours a week. Yeah, no, this was after 2 weeks. She's like, I already saved 8 hours each week in my time, And so, being able to have them give you that input and just be more close to them and so we oftentimes, like I spoke at different events, I don't really like to call us a software company. I feel like when you sell software, you're just selling it and that's it. We're more of a proactive approach, and part of that is by design so that we can continue to learn from the customer and how are they using it? What are the different tweaks that we need to make to the product? And so staying close to the customer has been vital to slowly make these tweaks and understand this is what they need. And there's been some areas in which we've rolled out, like our behaviors feature was a direct learning, going out, actually doing the hard work of going out to the facility and meeting with their behavioralist, right? And talking to them about what do you need. And so it's about having a pulse and being close to them as much as you can without also interrupting their day-to-day operations, because they are a 24/7 business, and it's difficult to want to get more time out of somebody that just wants to be done,
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, you bring up an interesting point, right? Like it's not 9 to 5.
Yep.
If you've got an issue at 7:30 p.m., there's staff there, right?
Yeah.
And that's, in my experience in a hospital or assisted living, that's where oftentimes there's a ball dropped.
Yep.
And somebody comes in and you get a double dose of something you might not need, right?
Yep.
I assume that was kind of one of your main points is the baton pass.
Yes. Yeah. So we have our normal business hours, but we'll take those calls at 7:30 or at 8 o'clock at night. Our team will just divvy it up and take those calls because we believe that that's important to help the customer succeed. But yeah.
And we're talking about assisted living, but we've already talked, there's small and then there's big, right? Like I know like there's probably like VA assisted living facilities that are probably bigger than most, I would assume. I have no idea really, but
there's like specialized homes. Yeah.
And there's some that are short term and then long term. Where did you guys like focus, and are there better ones suited to your software and your business model compared to others?
Yeah, so I think that we started in like the under 50 bed size, but we're now getting into those larger, 80, 100 bed facilities. I think that what we learned when we went out and did our validation interviews again, and as we've talked to people, the problems pretty much are the same across the board. The larger locations just have more money to throw at the problem to kind of, make it so it's not so bad, right? Yeah. And so from their side, they're probably more on the efficiency and how do I save money. So I wouldn't say that our product, I would say it helps that whole range. We don't do like a skilled nursing, which is different than assisted living, more of that like hospital feel. That's not what we do. But anything real assisted living, and even into, we're actually, I'd say about 40% of our customers are what they call like adult residential homes. So individuals with mentally disabled, handicaps. They're living in a home and there's behaviors and things that are being tracked. So we do that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I weirdly have spent some time in like assisted living places in the Midwest that are just small, 5,000 person towns.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next 5,000 person town is an hour away.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes it really difficult for the nurses and doctors and even the non-medical staff, right?
Yep.
You mentioned the report back that it was saving time.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of a feature that you guys talk about? Like this will save you guys time and theoretically like ROI where you could hire a few more?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like that's time savings is a big one. Another one is just, we're one of the things that differentiates us is that we went, again, this was going back to really kind of doing validation interviews before we wrote any lines of code. Even though we came from the industry, it was about talking to the people who would potentially purchase. And our philosophy was, let's not just look at it from the person that's purchasing. Like I mentioned before, it's not just about helping the administrators or the executive directors or the owners. It's also about how do we help the care staff not forget things. Because one of the things that I learned was that things would fall through the crack, not because the care staff was lazy, but it was because my inability to manage and remember to tell them these things. And so like, that's kind of where, going into these facilities and learning from them really kind of paid off for learning how, or be able to take that and put it into the product as it sits today.
Yeah. And from what I understand, it's if you can kind of use a smartphone,
Yeah.
you can use this software and these services. Right?
Yeah, that's really the big thing. Is like you'll talk to people and they'll be like, "Oh, I definitely like the idea of going digital because everyone else is walking around with a mobile phone and they're handling their banking and all that right from their mobile device." But there's this this disbelief that their staff's going to be able to handle technology because most of the technology or software that's out there is what we would call throw the kitchen sink at you. It's got every single bell and whistle and it's overwhelming. It's a computer-based system, or if they try to do it on mobile, it's you're pinching and zooming. It's not, we're a mobile first. It's a truly mobile app experience, and that makes it way easier for staff to get up and running. And so time and time again, like I'm thinking of one customer that we worked with her for over a year, and she said once after week 1, she said, "I should have done this a year ago." Yeah. She was thinking that it was, in fact, her exact words were, "I thought this was going to be hell, the transition." And she's like, it was way easier. And so I think that, yeah, being able to have a staff member who is already used to using mobile, be able to then document, talk into the phone, not have to write things. The experience is better for that care staff as well.
Oh, for sure. Is there a tie into, family outside of the care facility that they can check and make sure that their mom or dad or grandma or grandpa are getting their meds or anything like that?
Yeah, there's been lots of talk with that. We haven't done that fully yet because, again, talking to both sides of the equation, there's the concern that, if the sometimes facilities are a little bit more delayed in their documentation. It still happens and they still document. And then you might have family members who are a little bit more right on top of things. And if it wasn't right at 2:00 and they document at 2:30, it can cause some friction that doesn't necessarily need to be there. Right. So we're working again with both sides, again, talking to them, figuring out what is a happy medium to be able to do that. But yes, our goal is to have a family portal, and we're actually releasing here soon a version of that for our document section. But yeah, we want to be able to have transparency where it makes sense.
Yeah. I respect what you guys are doing because like there's software and business, but you guys are dealing with personalities and emotions too.
Oh yes.
and
people's behaviors and
exactly.
The way that they, their tendencies and things of that nature, for sure.
And there's no tech that will ever solve that. Right?
No. You can get as close as you can with making things simple, and that's made a difference. But yeah, in some cases, you still can't change behavior no matter what you do.
Oh, for sure. Is this a heavily regulated industry, lightly regulated, or are there kind of weird nuances that most people might not know about?
Yeah, I would say it's heavily regulated, and there are nuances. California kind of leads the way in regulation and things that you can or can't do. Like their regulations are it's called Title 22 is one of them. It's like 300 pages. Arizona's is I think Title 15 or something like that, but it's like 48 pages.
Right.
So it's you have quite the difference of what's what. So you just kind of keep combing through it, but you kind of try to with the software you try to allow for flexibility too, where you can set things up for your specific state, things like that.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So you guys have, traction now, and you've got a lot of paying customers, and you're building your team and all of those things. Where do you guys go from here? What gets you excited for the roadmap for the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think what's exciting, again, when you talk about team, I think everyone that we've brought on our team kind of really believes in the mission and what we're doing. And again, nothing against social media companies, but this it really has an actual impact on people's lives. And when I think about, although no one really wants to have to place their parents in an assisted living, right? Like I hope that I don't ever have to do that for my parents. The statistics would say that you're probably most likely on the side that you will.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, when I look about that in the future, and as a team, it's like, how would we want our parent to be cared for? Do we want them to have some paper-based system and things just, in people's heads? Or do we want a system that's modern, that's going to alert and catch things before things get worse? And so from a team aspect, everyone that we've brought on really believes in the fact that we're building something that's beyond just, us having a cool company. So that's kind of the cool thing. I think with AI and with the technology that's out there today, I think that there's so many cool things that we're excited about being able to bring. I mean, it's already, coming from paper to just as software is amazing, but now with other technologies that are at kind of our disposal, being able to bring that into the equation and seeing how we can make it, improve it even more. And so we're excited to continue to grow into additional states and show our flavor. Again, going back to having been in those shoes and understanding these little nuanced features that make a big difference for the customer, it's always exciting to get new features in their hands and go, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is exactly what I needed.
Yeah.
That's what drives us, is really the feedback from our customers and how they excited about how the product is helping them in their businesses. And we've had several customers now go, hey, we've opened up now our third or fourth location, and it's because Alcomy allows us to be able to do more with less.
Oh,
and that's
cool.
what's exciting for us.
For sure. Yeah, I was going to ask you about AI. You brought it up because some of the folks that I had visited over the years were nurses their entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And I assume they're the worst patients, right? Because they still knew a thing or two about taking care of people.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And I remember some, of their nurses being a little bit confused or like deer in the headlights, because they're like, man, does she actually know what she's talking about? Probably does, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that'd be nice to have an AI helper behind the scenes to kind of confirm some of those things, would be my guess.
Yeah. Or even looking at, we were just talking about this in a meeting actually earlier today, and it was about how, how can we use AI to look at some data that would be able to pull out some information that maybe we don't realize is there, or the facility doesn't realize is there, to be able to improve care or improve things like that. I think that's exciting to go above and beyond of just digitizing things, right?
Yeah.
How can we actually automate and catch things, early?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's really cool, because, you see all these medical device commercials over the years where they're basically telling you that, right? Like, we'll be able to catch this and detect that, but you got to have the data.
Yeah.
And it seems like a great place to catch a lot of that, right?
Yeah, we went to CES a few years back, this was before COVID, and there was a company there that was doing fall detection with cameras. And so they were able to, with the person's gait and movement, predict falls and therefore prevent falls.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's the kind of cool stuff, in a facility, you have older people who falls are a problem, and if you can prevent that, that'd be great. That's where technology can come in. So, yeah.
Very cool. Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation. You brought it up. Nobody really wants to think about this or face the inevitable, but it's part of life. And kudos to you and your team for tackling this, because ultimately we all might be on the receiving end of this, and we all want to kind of phase out gracefully and
That's
happy, right? So, well, thank you so much for joining us today, and kudos again. I think this is a good one. I'm looking forward to my later years and seeing what those are like, because you don't have a lot to worry about at a certain point, right?
Right.
You can just kind of focus on what matters. And as long as like people like you and your company are looking out for them, it's a good thing. So thank you so much.
Thank you.